Chapter 5468. 5. 12:20. She only glanced at Arbor coldly, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. This smile made Arbor's heart skip a beat. He stared at her face, his eyes extremely cold. This person is a person of heavenly fate, Arbor ordered lightly. Take her away first. Nia Yaoguang's smile just now made Arbor somewhat uncertain. She was so calm after being caught, and after her identity was exposed, she was neither arrogant nor rash. She did not make a fuss or make a fuss. This abnormal phenomenon made Arbor immediately think that this woman might have a backup plan. Could it be that she had already buried something in the city that could be detonated? Once she was caught, the entire Dragon Flame City would be buried with her? But on second thought, Dragon Flame City's defense array had long been activated. If there was anything wrong, she should be able to receive the news immediately. Now that there was nothing wrong, this meant that Arbor's heart still skipped a beat. As if thinking of something, he hurriedly turned and said, "Return to the palace." She was not in the mood, and did not have the time to deal with Su Hegua and the others. Moreover, this matter was so strange that it gave her a bad premonition. What's wrong? Little Pao, Fong Su, and the others felt their little junior sister's nervousness, and could not help but become slightly nervous. Little junior sister just said that Princess Su Hegua's maidservant was a person of heavenly fate. Was Su Hegua innocent? Was it related to heavenly fate? Although Su Hegua's Princess Su Yi immediately revealed a shocked expression, it did not mean that this matter had nothing to do with her. All the personal maidservants were people she trusted very much. How could she choose someone she was not familiar with? Therefore, this Nia Yaoguang should have been by her side for at least 3 months. After 3 months of contact, how could she not know Nia Yaoguang's true identity? Who was she kidding? Moreover, what was the purpose of this group of women coming to the capital this time? All of this was probably what Jojo was having a headache about now. Su Shanshan hurriedly took her little hand and comforted her gently. Don't panic, everyone is here. Let's return to the palace and discuss this with the crown prince first. Arbor nodded. She thought so too. This matter was urgent, and there was nothing more important than discussing it with Mo Lian, because she had thought of something that she had to tell him. Old concubine Su broke into a cold sweat. Seeing the little crown princess leading a group of people to leave in a hurry, her tense mood eased a little. This was truly a trip to the gates of hell. Old concubine Su only felt that her clothes were wet and cold. Being blown by the cold wind, she felt even more comfortable. She turned around and glared at Su Yi fiercely. She also felt a little resentful towards her in her heart. After all, she had not seen her maternal family for so many years. He didn't expect that his grandniece would hide such an important matter from him. Her maternal family had never revealed to him that Su Hegua had already defected to Tianyun. Old concubine Su was in a cold sweat. Fortunately, when she received the news, she immediately rushed out of the palace to support her grandniece. In the end, she ended up like this. The crown prince and his wife hated Tianyun the most. This time, it was estimated that they would blame her. Thinking of this, old concubine Su couldn't help shivering. Without saying anything to Su Yi, she turned around and was helped to get on the carriage. She went back to the palace as soon as possible. She had to explain the situation to His Majesty before the crown princess complained, and get herself out of it as soon as possible. Chapter 5469. Grand Consort Su rushed back in a hurry, but Arbor was also burning with anxiety. How could she have expected that Grand Consort Su would play the blame game and run to His Majesty to complain first? She directly returned to the Eastern Palace to find Jojo's Lian. Fortunately, her Lian had already returned to the palace. When she saw her rushing in like this, she hurriedly reached out to support her and asked curiously, "What's wrong, Jojo?" "Mo Lian, I thought of something." Arbor looked at him with a serious expression and said, Tianyun has always had a very formidable curse practitioner hiding in the dark. Now, I have reason to suspect that he's already hiding somewhere in our city, and just hasn't come out. Mo Lian held her hand and paused. You suspect that Black Cat and Chu Qingfei's master, that great Master Yi, is already in our city? Arbor shook her head. No, I suspect that it's that mysterious hall master of the Charm Hall. I'm guessing that he should be Tianyin's final trump card. The mysterious hall master of the charm hall. Emolien frowned slightly and thought for a moment before saying with a nod, I'll have people search the streets and alleys and house by house. I won't miss a single inch of land. If he's hiding somewhere, he'll give himself away every time we check. Arbor nodded pensively. I encountered a group of women on the street today. Do you know who I discovered? I heard that you went to the city gate to welcome the senior sisters from the Holy Water sect. That's right. Oh, that's right. I arranged for the senior sisters to rest first. When we bring second Aunt Master back later, I'll let my master out to meet them. Arbor pulled him and said, Don't interrupt. Do you know that when I was fetching my senior sisters, I met an acquaintance? You definitely won't be able to guess who she is. Emolien didn't have any interest in any acquaintances other than his wife. However, seeing that his wife was in high spirits, he couldn't bear to dampen her spirits. So he hastily asked, Who? Nie Yaoguang. Arbor tilted his head and said, Look at how powerful my eyes are. When I glanced at her, I felt that she looked very familiar. So I forcibly pulled her out from among more than 200 veiled women. When the little stoic said this, she was rather pleased with herself. I removed the transformation talisman on her, and guess what happened? Emolien looked down at her in amusement and said naturally, Nie Yaoguang has revealed his true colors and exposed his identity in front of everyone. Arbor punched him with his little fist and snorted. You're so smart that you know everything. I'm not talking to you anymore. Emolien. He was in the mood to play along with his beloved wife, so why was he being scolded? I told you I have a good memory. The little stoic spoke with conviction. She turned around to glare at the crown prince and said, Don't think that you're the only one with a photographic memory. Right. My Jojo is the smartest. The crown prince nodded repeatedly and reached out to ruffle her hair. He beckoned for Yuba and the others to come in and whispered a few instructions before pulling Arbor to sit down. Jojo, did you get angry with someone today? Arbor nodded and said huffily, There's actually someone with the same name and surname as me in Suhugwa's group. I was so angry that I couldn't help but want to hit her. Saishio and Saichi, who were standing on the side, couldn't help but twitch their mouths silently. Oh my, their crown princess. They clearly heard at that time that girl seemed to be called Xiao Xiao, not Jojo. Besides, it was just a name that was similar. Where did the same surname come from? Chapter 5470. I restrained my emotions and restrained myself from hitting her. That's too infuriating, Jojo's run. The little stoic said with a taut face. I didn't expect Qin eldest Omega Kotoku to be so treacherous and cunning. She purposely created these people to disgust me. She even purposely made one of them use my name. The little stoic was enraged, and her beady black eyes widened. I really didn't expect them to be so despicable and shameless. It must be because I usually get supreme pleasure from beating and scolding that Jojo. It feels like I'm being abused. The crown prince. What should I do about my beloved wife's persecutory delusion? Why did this matter involve Qin eldest Omega Kotoku? What should I do if I think those two were just a bit wronged? Would I explain it to the crown princess? I won't. It's better to make the crown princess dislike Qin eldest Omega Kotoku even more. They know that I dislike that kind of veiled saintess the most. My life experience tells me that I should just hit the saintess whenever I see her. Why did I feel like laughing? The crown prince. Yet they still had to name her Jojo and dress her up as a fairy saintess to purposely disgust me. The more Arbor spoke, the angrier he became. He slammed the table with a bang and said furiously, You don't know how angry I was at that time. It practically burned. Saishio and Saichi, His Highness the Crown Prince. This won't do. I have to do my best to stifle my laughter. The Crown Prince the Great was very clear that if he burst into laughter in front of his wife, then he would definitely be dead for sure. Did you know that Jojo's run was too infuriating? Arbor's small face was cold as he tried his best to keep a straight face and huffed. My rationality told me that I shouldn't vent my anger on that maidservant. But my emotions seemed to want me to act recklessly. Arbor sat upright and still as he looked at his husband expressionlessly. I tried very hard to restrain my emotions. In the end, I restrained myself from beating her. There's no point in venting my anger on her. The ones I should beat the most are the culprits, Professor Chin and Omega Kotoku. When Crown Prince heard this, he immediately nodded vigorously. He didn't feel sorry for big Omega Kotoku, who had been innocently shot. Instead, he continued to push the plot forward with all his might. Jojo, you did very well today. Not only did he control his emotions, but he also had a clear mind. He analyzed the situation thoroughly and found the mastermind behind it. Not only have you exposed Nie Yaoguang's true colors, you've also seen through the phenomenon of this incident. That's right. It's Omega Kotoku that's hurrying over to annoy us. Your analysis is correct, very correct. Seeing you so calm, I feel very comforted. Emo Lian's handsome face was taut as he spoke. At the same time, he extended his paw and gently stroked the little stoic's hand. Kai Xiao and Kai Chi were speechless. Crown Prince the Great, is it really appropriate for you to say funny things with such a deadpan expression? The Crown Princess's train of thought is so bizarre. So why do you have to follow her and go crooked? You're afraid that the Crown Princess isn't crooked enough. So you courted disaster by leading her crooked and sprinting with her, letting your thoughts run wild. This really isn't too appropriate. The little stoic sighed and clenched her small fists. Big Qin and Omega Kotoku have launched an all-out attack in the kingdom of Qingzhou, and may have sent many people to infiltrate our capital. You mustn't lower your guard during this period of time. They may take the next step at any time. The little stoic stood up and paced back and forth in front of Emo Lian with her paws behind her back. Chapter 5471. I think the best method is to first ferret out that mysterious hall master in the city, and Arbor made a beheading motion as her chilly eyes stared icily at Emo Lian. Hubby, are you confident? Emo Lian twitched his mouth and frantically nodded, replying without any moral integrity. Don't worry, wifey. Leave this matter to hubby. Hubby will definitely dispose of that damn mysterious hall master as soon as he finds him. Arbor nodded with a frosty expression and muttered to herself, see if they still dare to cause trouble for me. Killing their most capable hall master would be the icing on the cake for their plot to develop the imperial providence. Reporting to Your Highness the Crown Prince and Crown Princess. His Majesty is summoning you to Benevolence Hall for a chat. Arbor was taken aback and glanced at her husband. Royal father wants to discuss matters with you again? Could it be that the situation in the kingdom of Qing was becoming increasingly urgent? Who knew how Duanyu was doing? Arbor's eyes flickered. However, Emo Lian raised his brow, feeling that his old father seemed to be here to stir up trouble. Could it be that he wanted to stir up trouble again? Because he was having a good life. The young couple packed up and boarded the carriage. When they arrived at Benevolence Hall, they were welcomed inside. Not only was the Emperor present, but Her Majesty the Empress was also sitting next to him. Her Majesty the Empress's eyes involuntarily brightened when she saw the two enter hand in hand. The more she looked at this pair of children, the more she liked them. However, the Emperor asked sullenly, do you know why father called you here? He really wanted to teach these two a lesson. Last time, a state security incident actually caused him to be in a complete mess and unable to eat or sleep in peace. It was simply infuriating. The only thing that the Emperor rejoiced about right now was that his youngest brother, the old Prince of Jianpain, had gone crazy from the seizures earlier and pulled his son into seclusion with him. Being locked up at home for so many days actually freaking saved him a lot of trouble. Otherwise, based on the Crown Prince's previous temper of disliking anyone he saw and disliking everyone, wouldn't he make an example out of the old Prince of Jianpain? At that time, he would definitely have a headache. Wouldn't that old King Jianpain be crying his heart out in his palace? Fortunately, the old King Jianpain was tactful enough to close himself off. When the great emperor thought of this, he could not help but sigh in relief. He felt that he should take back the words that he had said to his youngest brother. Stupid coward, unable to be educated. Arbor didn't know why the great emperor asked them to come. She just glanced around and saw old concubine Su, who was crying silently. His heart stirred inexplicably, vaguely feeling that he had guessed something. Emo Lian gently grasped her hand, and he also glanced at Grand Consort Su. What business does Imperial Father have with us? The great emperor sat on the main seat and wanted to put on airs in front of the couple. Unexpectedly, his foot was gently kicked by the empress. He couldn't help but feel depressed. Old concubine Su said that just now at the gate of the city, the crown princess fought with the people of Suha. The situation was out of control. Is it true? It can't be, right? This old lady must have nothing better to do. She had yet to diss Suhugwa and become the lackey of Tianyun and his group. At this moment, she actually accused her in front of the great emperor? If the old lady didn't know how to behave, then don't blame Sir Jojo for dissing her. Imperial father. Emolian spoke first. I don't know if you know that there is a transformed person of Tianyun in the team of Suha's maids. This person used to be the holy nun of the Sun Moon Temple. When she was in Shuntian Prefecture, she repeatedly plotted against me and the crown princess. Chapter 5472. Oh. When the emperor heard the crown prince's words, he turned his head to look at Grand Consort Su, who was sitting on pins and needles. What is Grand Consort Su's explanation? You also know that the current situation in our divine province is tense, and we are irreconcilable with the Heavenly Fate Empire. If Grand Consort Su's maternal family is implicated with the Heavenly Fate Empire, the emperor purposely paused at this point and glanced faintly at Grand Consort Su. This made Grand Consort Su increasingly unable to sit still. She hastily stood up and said, Your Majesty, you mustn't listen to the Crown Prince's one-sided remarks. I can guarantee that Suhugwa has absolutely no connection with the Heavenly Fate Empire. What you said is too fake. The little stoic rudely interrupted him. You've already unearthed Nye Yaoguang in your team. It's hard to guarantee that you won't unearth several more Ho Yaoguang, Wang Yaoguang, and Sun Yaoguang tomorrow, right? Grand Consort Su was so angry that her entire body quivered, and she hastily shook her head in denial. No, it's not like that. There's no dispute about this matter. A chuckling voice was heard from the roof. Arbor looked up, and his eyes involuntarily brightened. Second Ant Master? Second Ant Master Yang Shirong was currently squatting on the eaves of the main hall, without a proper appearance. She held a wine pot in one hand and a cup in the other. She laughed as she drank. My little disciple. Yang Shirong's sudden appearance startled the emperor and his entourage. Many royal guards even dashed in from outside the hall with nervous expressions while wielding sabers and swords. Someone actually secretly squatted on the wooden beam of Fu Ren Hall, without them noticing at all. It was evident that the newcomer's cultivation was more than just a little bit higher than everyone's combined. Yang Shirong jumped down from the beam with a smile, and cupped her hands at the emperor. Holy Water Sex Yang Shirong greets your majesty. The emperor had an amiable expression, and waved his hand to dismiss the royal guards outside the hall. He said with a smile, Holy Water Sex Second Peak Master, we have long heard of your great name. May I know what Peak Master Yang meant by your words just now? Yang Shirong cracked a smile, and took out a jade image talisman from her pocket, and tossed it into the air. Ah, I was passing by and accidentally recorded everything that happened. Your Majesty can take a look. In any case, there was no proof. Now that there was everything on the jade talisman, the whole process was clear. If His Majesty saw it personally, it would be clear who was right and who was wrong. After carefully watching the process recorded in the image talisman, the Emperor and the Empress both turned to look at old concubine Su, who was slightly pale. Old Imperial concubine, this is your fault. You were clearly present at that time, and already knew that her family was colluding with Tianyun. Why are you trying to argue with the Crown Princess in front of us? The Empress frowned and said coldly, Princess Suhugwa's personal maidservant is a person blessed by the heavens. Now, she has been imprisoned by the Crown Princess. This matter is true. What else is there to refute? That's not the case, Your Majesty. Old concubine Su felt bitter in her mouth and stammered to explain. Our Sahegwo has nothing to do with destiny. This maid, you say that she's someone chosen by the heavenly fate. What proof do you have? Just because she disguised herself and used a transformation talisman, could it be that you can falsely accuse her of being a person of destiny? The Emperor waved his hand and directly interrupted old concubine Su's words. He said coldly, Old imperial concubine, don't pester endlessly. Come, invite old imperial concubine back to the palace. In the following month, please stay in your palace and recuperate. Don't come out to talk nonsense again. Chapter 5473. Let me go. Let me go. Old concubine Su couldn't help screaming. The emperor actually wanted to put her in confinement? What was the difference between this and confining her for a month? The most terrible thing was that whether she had a chance to come out after a month depended on the emperor's mood. Now she had some regrets in her heart. If she had known this, she wouldn't have gotten involved in Su Yi's mess. Now she was in trouble. Sui was also in trouble. The emperor also spoke harshly to her. It seemed that he was going to punish her severely. Old concubine Su felt cold all over. When she was carried out, her legs couldn't help trembling slightly. However, as soon as she walked out of the gate of Foreign Hall, she heard endless screams. In the square in front of Foreign Hall, several eunuchs and palace maids seemed to be haunted by ghosts. They stumbled and rolled a few times, exclaiming several times. Old concubine Su was startled, and the two eunuchs who forcibly supported her to drag her out also stopped. The three of them stopped on the steps in front of Foreign Hall. At the same time, the guards in the palace heard the exclamation and rushed here quickly. Old concubine Su didn't understand what was going on. When she saw the thing climbing up the stairs, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. Was it? Nie Yaoguang. Old concubine Su's cheeks twisted fiercely. She stared at the strange thing that climbed up the stairs with all four limbs in disbelief. There was a pair of black antennae on its head. It looked like two spider legs covered with a layer of very fine fluff. Old concubine Su gasped and couldn't help but take a step back. The two eunuchs who supported her were also frightened, and hurriedly stepped back. When they saw that the strange thing was climbing faster and faster, it almost kept climbing in the direction of old concubine Su. The two eunuchs were so scared that their faces turned pale. They hurriedly let go of old concubine Su's hands and ran into Foreign Hall. His Majesty and the Empress had come out when they heard the scream. The two eunuchs didn't dare to be rash. They stopped and knelt on the ground. They pressed their heads tightly and didn't even dare to raise their heads. Wuxia glanced at them and walked out of the gate of Foreign Hall by them. Looking at the source of the sound, she saw old concubine Su fell on the stairs. Half of her waist hurt. She waved her hands in panic. Nie Yaoguang quickly crawled in front of her and laid there, ready to attack. His scarlet eyes stared at her coldly. Old concubine Su probably used all her strength to restrain herself from screaming in front of old concubine Su. Arbor followed him out of the Foreign Hall. Seeing the scene in front of him, he couldn't help but smile. Bringing the mutated Nie Yaoguang into the palace, and letting Nie Yaoguang find a chance to escape from Furen Palace, was done according to her plan. She wanted this Yaoguang saintess to know one thing clearly. Little glutinous dumpling, what's that? The emperor glanced at the couple suspiciously. Why do I feel like this was deliberately arranged by someone? How could such a monster appear in the palace, so openly like this? The emperor could almost be sure that this must be done by the black-hearted couple. The emperor stole a glance at his expressionless daughter-in-law and coughed softly. Glutinous dumpling, what do you think about this matter now? The emperor was also aggrieved. He didn't dare to ask more, and could only ask tentatively. Chapter 5474. Old concubine Su was lying on the steps in front of Foreign Hall. She was scared by the monster, and fainted directly. He couldn't let old concubine Su lie straight on the cold stone floor, and ignore her all the time, right? It was too much of an eyesore. A faint cold light flashed through Arbor's eyes, and he said with a light expression, "How does father want to deal with it?" "I don't know if father has found it." Nie Yaoguang still insisted on coming to find old concubine Su after turning into a zombie. Obviously, she has a deep impression of old concubine Su. Maybe there are some secrets between them. Old concubine Su woke up faintly and thought that she had been moved back to her bedroom. However, when she opened her eyes, she still saw Nie Yaoguang lying in front of her. When she heard the little crown princess's words, she almost fainted again. She held her chest with difficulty and steadied her breath. However, when she saw Nie Yaoguang's distorted face, Old concubine Sue was so anxious that she leaned back and hit her head on the steps with a bang. She was in so much pain that she burst into tears and cried sadly, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty! Save me, Your Majesty! Where are they? Where are they? Come on, take this thing away, take it away!" Her lips trembled, and her hands couldn't help but tremble. At this time, old concubine Sue should have been hit by 10,000 points of mental attack, and her whole body trembled uncontrollably. Nie Yaoguang's appearance was really terrible. Her lips were blue and purple, her facial features were distorted, and there were 2 black tentacles sticking out of her head. At a glance, she didn't look like a human being. To be honest, she was even more disgusting than the zombie that could walk and jump. Everyone liked the zombie, and then looked at this thing, and they really felt that it was very unpleasant to the eyes. She looks a bit like a demonic cultivator with poisonous spiders in her body, Emo Lien whispered to Arbor. "Jojo, analyze it for me." Xiao Mu had an analytical expression on her face as she said with certainty, "It must be that after the mutation failed, it turned into this inhuman and ghostly appearance. Very few people can achieve a perfect transformation." Sir Jojo snorted. When he thought of Wei Su, his expression turned cold again. Just like young Master Wei, the mutation can be considered perfect, no matter how she changes. Arbor took a few steps forward and walked down the stairs. This Nie Yaoguang was courting death. He was definitely going to die today. Arbor walked to old Princess Su. At this time, the old concubine was scared out of her wits, and her nerves were almost in a mess. When she saw Arbor coming over, she hurriedly reached out to grab her leg. Arbor unceremoniously kicked her hand away and scolded, "Get lost, you're in the way." Old concubine Sue rolled down more than 10 floors along the stairs and rolled to the platform in a panic. Fortunately, they were wearing thick winter clothes. She rolled all the way down, but it wasn't a big deal. However, when she thought about how she, the dignified consort dowager, had actually been kicked by that damned girl, and had rolled down the steps in such a humiliating manner in public, she choked back a mouthful of old blood in her heart, and felt very depressed. Arbor didn't even look at old concubine Sue from the corner of his eyes. He walked to Nie Yaoguang, and stared at her from the corner of his eyes. His eyes were filled with hidden hatred, and a touch of coldness appeared on his lips. "I originally wanted to keep you for a few days." Arbor's gaze fell on her coldly, and he said faintly, "Unfortunately, you're too ignorant and tactful. Trash will always be trash. No matter how much medicine you take to mutate, no matter how much shortcuts you take, you're still trash." Chapter 5475. Nie Yaoguang, I, the Crown Princess, want you to understand this principle. Arbor looked coldly at Nie Yaoguang, who kept twisting her body on the ground, as if she wanted to create sparks from the friction. Her posture was unusually twisted, and her 4 claws scratched the ground fiercely. She looked like she was ready to attack. Her eyes stared straight at Arbor with unconcealable hatred. Arbor glanced at her coldly. "I'll give you a chance to fight with me. As long as you can survive 3 moves from me, I'll let you go. From then on, we'll bury the hatchet and never find trouble with you again." The group of Imperial Palace guards who had heard the news were all gathered at the bottom of the stairs. When they heard the little crown princess's words, they couldn't help but look at each other. Compared to the secret guards who always followed the crown princess, these Imperial Palace guards usually only met the crown prince and the crown princess face to face. Although they had heard that the crown princess was extremely powerful, they had never seen it with their own eyes. Therefore, when they heard the crown princess's words, they couldn't help but feel worried. If Her Highness the Crown Prince Consort was injured in the process of fighting with Nie Yaoguang under their protection, the ones who would be punished in the end would definitely be this group of unlucky fellows. If even a strand of hair on the young Crown Prince Consort's head was harmed, given the degree to which His Highness the Crown Prince doted on her, they would probably be in deep trouble. When he thought of this, the leader of the Imperial Palace Guards couldn't help but sigh. He was afraid that today's matter would be difficult. Seeing their Crown Prince standing on the stairs with a smile on his face, and an expression that said, "My Crown Princess is always right," it was a little unbearable to look at. Arbor leaped down and landed on the flat ground below. Nie Yaoguang's head suddenly rotated 360 degrees. She swung her limbs in the opposite direction and climbed down the stairs. Wuxia was shocked by her terrifying appearance. His eyes couldn't help but widen. He said in a low voice, "Can all the bones in her body be reversed?" Just now, Nie Yaoguang's head had suddenly turned in a big circle. His feet were in front, and his hands were behind him. The way he crawled quickly had really frightened her, and made her break out in a cold sweat. Just looking at it was enough to make one's hair stand on end. It could only be said that a daughter-in-law, who dared to fight against such a thing, had a very strong mental fortitude. The Empress felt that if she looked at such a strange-looking thing, she would feel uncomfortable. However, she did not expect her daughter-in-law to be able to hold her own. The two of them exchanged blows in an instant. The Pharaoh and Xiao Mu's hand slapped over his head without any mercy at all. The ruler landed squarely on Nie Yaoguang's head. The scene of Nie Yaoguang's head being smashed into smithereens did not happen. After being hit by the ruler, she was still very proud. She raised her head and grinned provocatively at Arbor. "Didn't you say that you could defeat me in 3 moves? Look, now your ruler is like scratching an itch for me. It doesn't hurt at all. It just looks mighty." That was the meaning behind her provocative gaze. Xiao Mu merely glanced at her, before promptly retracting her gaze. The second ruler landed on Nie Yaoguang's head at a faster speed with a trace of fiery light. This movement was so big that everyone couldn't help but widen their eyes in shock. Chapter 5476. Even old concubine Su, who was lying on the side and shivering, couldn't help but tremble and shrink her neck subconsciously because of her earth-shattering strike. When they looked up again, everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. They saw that the mutated thing was still lying there, and there was no damage on its head at all. She even grinned provocatively at Arbor, as if mocking her for being a pretty girl and not being able to hurt her at all. In fact, although Nie Yaoguang had become very ugly, she still had some intelligence and memory at this time. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so hostile to Arbor. She was very happy now. At first, Arbor was bragging, which really made her nervous. She said that she would kill her in 3 moves. These words were all lies from that scumbag Arbor. She knew it. She had already been modified and mutated, and her survivability had long been stronger than ordinary people. Although she was a 3rd-level mutated waste, she had also gone through 3 mutations. Her body couldn't be as unchanged as before. She had long been made into a body of copper skin and iron bones that couldn't be broken. Arbor wanted to use such a small ruler to smash her head. What a fool's dream. The more Nie Yaoguang thought about it, the more excited she became. Her face was distorted as she raised her head at Arbor. Her 2 antennae swayed back and forth on the top of her head, expressing her joy. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly for a long time, and suddenly raised the ruler in her hand. Nie Yaoguang put away her nervousness and looked at her with disdain. This small broken ruler couldn't break her head once or twice. Could it be that she could go to heaven for the 3rd time? It was said that the first drum was strong, the second was weak, and the third was exhausted. Arbor's 3rd attack was definitely not as good as the first 2. Nie Yaoguang didn't care about Arbor's ruler at all, until that oppressive flame suddenly spread out from the ferrule. A trace of black flame ignited the remaining strands of Nie Yaoguang's hair, and suddenly burned her neck and face. With a loud bang, Arbor's strike broke Nie Yaoguang's neck. Everyone only heard a kacha sound. He looked back in horror, and saw that half of Nie Yaoguang's neck was crooked. His head was swaying slightly, as if it was hanging from a bamboo pole. Old concubine Su, who was close at hand, turned back and vomited. She was scared out of her wits, her body trembling back and forth. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes and fell hard on the stone floor. This time, he fainted from fright and completely fainted. Arbor looked back at the grand concubine, and looked down at his hand in confusion. The ferrule in her hand glowed faintly, and the black holy flames revolved around her fingers obediently. The old lady was too easily frightened. She was just joking with them, who knew that their tolerance would be so poor. Speaking of which, she didn't do it on purpose. Before the fight, she had already reminded Nie Yaoguang that she could defeat her in 3 moves. Why didn't she believe it? Xiaomu shook her head and indifferently stared at a certain thing that had collapsed to the ground with a plop, its limbs twitching continuously. A black crystal rolled out of Nie Yaoguang's head. It was the size of a thumb. It was one of the few large crystal cores she had seen so far. Chapter 5477. What made Arbor feel a bit strange was that Nie Yaoguang's crystal core had clearly fallen out of her head. However, she hadn't completely stopped breathing. Her hands and feet were twitching nonstop, as if she wanted to take something out of her bosom. Under the Crown Prince's signal, 2 hidden guards stepped forward and kicked Nie Yaoguang down the stairs. Nie Yaoguang rolled down the stairs and fell beside Grand Concubine Su with a bang. Grand Concubine Su was slowly waking up. She saw Nie Yaoguang's round eyes sticking to her left hand. She immediately cried out in alarm and fell backward, her head bumping into the stairs. Bai Wuxia's mouth twitched, and he hastily directed the dumbfounded royal maids at the side. What are you staring blankly for? Didn't you see that Grand Concubine Su has fainted several times? Quickly help her up and send her back to her bedchamber. Isn't it good for her to stay in her bedchamber and enjoy life at her age? Why did she always like to come out and cause trouble? The emperor watched this scene expressionlessly. When he saw the little crown princess shove that crystal core to the crown prince, he was truly speechless. He lowered his head to look at Nie Yaoguang, who had fallen on the jasper stone platform. He saw her take out a crumpled item from her bosom with great effort. Why did it look a bit like a sealed letter? Ridiculous, this mutated monster was about to die. But she actually took out a letter from that pile of rags? It wouldn't be believable if someone didn't purposely give it to her. The 2 hidden guards rudely kicked Nie Yaoguang, who was moving mechanically again. This kick was very powerful and directly kicked Nie Yaoguang's head off her neck. Arbor was speechless and silently glanced at the 2 hidden guards. The 2 walked forward and used the tips of their swords to move the crumpled letter on the ground. They turned the letter over and saw a line of words written in the middle of the envelope. To Arbor only. The 2 immediately looked at each other and turned to look at the little stoic crown princess. Crown princess, this letter is for you. Emo Lian's eyes turned slightly cold as she said faintly, "What a dirty thing. I don't even know if it's contaminated with corpse poison. Jojo, I'm not watching." Xiaomu nodded with a docile and obedient expression. "It's burned." Emo Lian grasped her small hand and turned around to leave this place. However, as if he had suddenly sensed something, he suddenly turned around. He saw that the letter that was burned by the secret guard was wrapped in a ball of flame and flew up 1/2 meter into the air. At the moment when the flames were burning, a cold and handsome face suddenly appeared in the flames. Just like that, he stared at them coldly, his eyes devoid of any signs of life. "The Holywood fragment and a wisp of your soul are all with me. Are these 2 things worth a trip to the Qingzhou kingdom? Before the end of the month, I will be waiting for you in Qingzhou. Remember, you are the only one who can come." Emo Lian's complexion was ashen, and he raised his hand to erase the face in the flames. He turned to look at Arbor and saw his wifey's expressionless face. She silently glanced at him. Bai Wuxia asked in shock, "Who is that person?" The emperor's expression was cold and furious. "Wuxia. He is the former second young master of the Qin estate and the current leader of Heavenly Fate, Qin Xian." Bai Wuxia nodded his head in astonishment. Although she had seen portraits of the Qin estate's leaders before, it wasn't as realistic as seeing his soul with her own eyes today. Chapter 5478. For this person to be able to pour a wisp of his soul remembrance into the letter, and do as he pleased to this extent, it was evident that his divine sense had already reached the acme of perfection. Bai Wuxia glanced at the young couple worriedly. He knew that they already had something to say, so he turned around and said to the emperor, "We also don't know the whole story of this matter. We'll think of how to help after the children finish their discussion." The crown prince was furious on the inside, but he forcefully restrained his emotions on the surface. He nodded at the emperor and the empress and said, "Royal father, royal mother, don't worry. This son will take care of this matter." After bidding farewell to the emperor and empress, the 2 of them strolled hand in hand toward the eastern palace along a pebble path. After walking for less than 2 minutes, Emolian angrily turned around and pressed the little stoic into her arms. She warned in a low voice, "I forbid you from going, do you hear me?" The little crown princess blinked and nodded. "I didn't say I wanted to go." Prince Emo reached out to grab her chin. He couldn't help but feel deflated when he looked down. How could she not go? Jojo's wisp of soul remembrance and the last fragment of the holy wood were both in that damn Chin Xian's hands. The blatant threat in his words practically hit her in the face. She simply didn't need to think deeply about it. Sir Jojo waved his hand and said unconcernedly, "It's fine for me to be like this right now. I've pretty much found all the fragments of my soul. Even if I'm missing this last fragment, I'll just be more careful in the future and fight less with my divine sense in order to prevent my soul from becoming unstable." It was just a bit of a pity that he couldn't summon the Fushi sword anytime and anywhere. However, compared to going to the kingdom of Qingzhou to see the person he loathed, losing a wisp of his soul wasn't anything to be regretful about. As for the sapling, he'll definitely understand me very well. At worst, Qiuqiu and I will lose a wisp of my soul, and he will lose a fragment. Both of us aren't perfect, so let's not mock each other. Master, Qiuqiu might be able to understand you. Qiuqiu also doesn't wish for Master to take risks. Master, we're not going anywhere. You can't send a sheep to the tiger's den and go to Qingzhou by yourself. That's just sending yourself to death. Speaking of Qiuqiu, Qiuqiu arrived and climbed up from her back, kicking its legs above her head, flailing its arms and legs as it shouted angrily. "Let's anger him to death, anger him to death, anger this big bad guy to death. We're not going anywhere." Emolian's handsome face was taut, and his thin lips were pursed into a straight line. The words "I'm very unhappy right now" were written all over his face. Chin Xian, this person, was simply despicable. What was he thinking? He wanted Jojo to go to Qingzhou alone. Arbor tilted his head and walked 2 steps. When he turned around, he saw that his husband was still standing in the same place. She couldn't help but pout and yell at him. "What are you doing? Let's go back and eat." Emolian came back to her senses and quickly followed after her. She picked up her small waist, and with a tap of her foot, she flew out as light as a feather. The little stoic was very dissatisfied. "I can also fly. I also have a flying talisman. You should let me fly you next time." Emolian looked down at this naggy little thing, and his originally gloomy mood inexplicably improved. After dinner, the little stoic solemnly invited Second Ant Master and the Holy Water Sect sisters to the main hall. With a wave of her hand, she released Morong Sun. The pitiful Morong Sun was eating hot pot with the Holy Sons and the others when she was released by the little stoic. She was still holding a pair of chopsticks and looked around in shock. Chapter 5479. Subsequently, Sir Holy Sun also ran out with a steaming pot of hodgepodge soup and stood on the side to watch the commotion. Similarly, Feng Chongqing and the others also came out. Everyone was holding a pair of chopsticks, and some chopsticks were still holding meat slices that hadn't been delivered to their mouths yet. Now that everyone was gathered in one place, they looked at each other and were momentarily at a loss. This stoic was too unreliable. Before letting them out, she didn't even warn them and directly dragged them out. The little stoic expressionlessly glanced at the hot pot in Sir Holy Sun's arms and said dryly, "Just now, your little friend died on the steps outside. I saw her." Sir Holy Sun hastily put down the pot and shook his head. "She's not my little friend anymore. I have nothing to do with Nie Yaoguang anymore." He could even see a trace of odd contempt on this stoic's face. How preposterous. Letting a man of striking appearance like him hold a pot was truly an eyesore. He saw Nie Yaoguang's matter very clearly in the star domain. Ever since he learned that the Sun Moon Temple's higher-ups, including Nie Yaoguang, were all lackeys of the All-Seer, he had already drawn a clear line between himself and them. Now that he saw Nie Yaoguang's mutated appearance, Sir Holy Sun only felt extremely nauseous and was glad that he had escaped unscathed. Otherwise, he really didn't dare to imagine what he would become if he joined a freakish organization like the All-Seer. He might mutate even more and become stronger like Wei Su, Or he might become a second Nie Yaoguang and directly evolve into a monster after the mutation failed. But no matter what the outcome was, it wasn't what Sir Holy Sun wanted. He even felt that he had gotten used to staying in the little stoic star domain. Time was tranquil, flowers were blooming, and the scenery of an otherworldly paradise truly couldn't be any better. He really couldn't do it if he had to go out and continue this world of mutual deception and shoulder the mission of restoring the Sun Moon Temple's glory. The little stoic looked at Sir Holy Sun and blinked. She had long noticed that Sir Holy Sun and the Phoenix clansmen, MN, and possibly Shurchen, Ginkgo Peony, and the others. She didn't know if it was because they had stayed in her star domain for too long. But now, besides cultivating, they ate, drank, and strolled around the star domain. If she hadn't forced them to come out, they might not even remember to come out to the outside world, to pursue new things for 10 days to half a month. The little stoic discovered that these people had already entered the stage of retirement ahead of time. Was this appropriate? They were all young, and were at the age where they had to work hard to improve themselves. Especially Holy Sun Mian. No matter how much he nurtured him, he felt like he had become useless. Previously, when the Divine Hall was destroyed, didn't the Holy Sun say, "If we don't perish in the ashes, we will be reborn in the ashes. And as long as the Divine Hall has you and me, it will eventually rise again." Such impassioned words. 2 priests and 3 divine guards followed him. Later, Priest Radiant Light also returned to follow him. But what happened after that? The Holy Sun didn't know when he would send everyone away. What was going on? After being raised by Sir Jojo in the star field for a while, the Son of God had become more and more useless. Now, he did not even mention anything about the Renaissance Temple. What about his beliefs? God, why don't you want them anymore? Sir Holy Sun almost covered his face with the pot again. What kind of weird gaze was the little stoic using to stare at him so fixedly? What was she looking at? Can I ask you something? It would be strange if this slap did not kill Morong Sun. It wasn't easy for her to salvage the situation for her Sherzuandaran. She didn't want to be slapped to death by that foolish second martial uncle. Then who could she cry to? Thankfully, young Shirong did not really want to slap Morong Sun's head, although she hadn't seen her eldest senior sister in a long time. Her eldest senior sister's prestige was still there. In the past, it was always eldest senior sister who chased after her and beat her up on the snowy peaks. She never had the chance to hit eldest senior sister. She didn't dare to hit Morong Sun. She reckoned that she would be very miserable after this slap, right? Yang Shirong did not dare to hit Morong Sun, but Morong Sun directly knocked her on the head. Chapter 5481. Disciple also told me that you've matured a lot recently and aren't as silly as before. But I didn't expect that you haven't changed at all after seeing you today. She was still so silly. Yang Shirong looked at Morong Sun in bewilderment for a moment, before suddenly pouncing forward and tightly hugging Morong Sun with both arms. She wailed, "Eldest senior sister, I really didn't think that I would be able to see you again in this lifetime. I originally thought it was a dream meeting, but I didn't expect everything to be real." Yang Shirong picked up Morong Sun's sleeve and wiped the tears on her face. She wept and lamented, "It's good that you're back, senior sister. I can finally hand over the burden on my shoulders to you." "In your dreams?" Morong Sun couldn't resist retorting. She threw away the hand Yang Shirong was using to wipe her tears and disdainfully swept her eyes over her. "Second junior sister, the sect's future depends on you. I, your eldest senior sister, came back on this trip to recuperate. Old. You look like you've relieved yourself of a burden. It makes people uncomfortable just looking at you." Yang Shirong's eyes widened, and she raised her voice in disbelief. "Eldest senior sister, you're actually trying to shirk your responsibility?" Scram. Morong Sun took a step back and turned her head to look at the expressionless arbor. "Disciple, come here." Hence, as soon as she called out, Su Shanshan and the others all pounced over with a whoosh, trapping her in the center of the crowd and preventing her from getting out. Morong Sun originally wanted to pretend to be strong and joke around a bit to smooth out this sorrowful atmosphere. However, when she turned around and saw Su Shanshan, and the others crying their hearts out. Her eyes involuntarily reddened as well. She truly couldn't continue pretending. Moreover, the little stoic expressionlessly said, "Master, it's not shameful to want to cry. Go ahead and cry. Disciple won't laugh at you." Morong-sun forcibly held back her tears. What an expressionless traitor, Morong-sun thought. She raised her hand to stroke Su Shanshan and the others' heads. Thousands of words converged into a soft sigh. Thank you for your hard work. She didn't just miss out on time these years. She also missed out on her disciples' growth. She felt regretful just thinking about it. In the days before the full moon banquet, Arbor had been cultivating with his son in the star field. Whenever he had some free time, he would use it to draw talismans and refine pills. He had prepared many things for everyone. She became more and more skilled at drawing talismans. The 11th jade slip of the golden talisman jade tome had also been opened. Arbor felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. It was as if he had drawn talismans countless times in the past. Now that he thought about it, he must have learned it from his master and martial uncle after his soul explosion. He had already broken through to the 11th level of the Spirit Division record, and a 12th branch meridian had been formed in his divine veins. She stayed in the star field for 10 days, but it was 4 months in the outside world. Not only had his talisman skills improved, even his alchemy skills had improved by quite a bit. Presently, not only had Arbor successfully advanced to become a divine grade great talisman master, he was also an extremely outstanding divine grade alchemist. In the past, he would have to spend an entire day and night to make the soul returning pill. Now he only needed an hour to make it. After all, this fellow had nothing to do, so he guarded the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron in the star field, and continuously refined soul returning pills now. Every soul returning pill she refined could reach the level of a black-veined pill. Her pill refinement skills were extraordinary beyond compare. Chapter 5482. However, it was her talisman art. Sir Jojo frowned. The probability of her drawing a sacred-grade golden talisman was still 50-50. In other words, she could draw at most 50 sacred-grade golden talismans out of 100 talismans. The rest would still be purple talismans. But even so, if these words were to spread out, it would still frighten others. If old Master Mu knew that his granddaughter could draw a sacred-grade golden talisman out of every 2 talismans she drew, wouldn't he faint from fright? Currently, she had drawn at least 10 divine-rank sacred-grade golden talisman storage jade talismans, which could hold about half of the entire Dragon Flame City. It could be said that ordinary cultivators could live a carefree life with just 1 sacred-grade golden talisman storage jade talisman. What made Arbor the happiest was that the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron's 9 stars were shining brightly after her relentless feeding and pill refinement. Only the crescent moon in the middle was still dim and lightless. Now the deterrence her colored glass cauldron fire released was no different from a sacred fire. Sir Jojo was very happy that his little cauldron could develop to its current state. After all, when he first saw it, it really was an unprepossessing little lousy cauldron today. Emolien had returned early in the morning. He drew close to her mysteriously and whispered into her ear, "Xiao Xiao, I found something." Arbor looked up and glanced at him. "Tomorrow is our son's 1-month-old banquet. Why isn't Duanyu here yet?" Prince Emo secretly ground his teeth. These past 2 days, Xiao Xiao had asked this question the most. Duanyu was so annoying. Duanyu was so annoying. Duanyu probably won't be able to come. Emolien answered expressionlessly. This guy was far away in Qingzhou. Why would he come? Why would he come? Sir Jojo was rather displeased. He took out a jade ornament and hung it on his son's waist. Look, he's already given the gift, so why isn't he here yet? This jade ornament was probably a token that could mobilize a portion of Tsangzhou's manpower and resources. It was also very likely that it could mobilize the royal palace guards. Hence, this jade ornament was probably the symbol of Tsangzhou's emperor, representing power and wealth. Duanyu, this idiot, gave this toy to his son as soon as he made a move. Prince Emo lowered his head to look at his expressionless son and complained in his heart. Why was her son always so expressionless when he saw his father? Her son was as soft as a glutinous rice ball. He hugged his father and called him father. He was so cute. What was wrong with his son? Arbor was slightly stunned. He lowered his head and saw that the jade ornament hanging on his son's waist had disappeared. He guessed that his son had taken it back into his inner world. The couple's lips twitched. At the same time, they felt that the way their son looked at them with an expressionless face was inexplicably cute. What was going on? This little thing actually knew how to store precious things in its inner world, so that it wouldn't be carried around by others and stolen? Arbor glanced back at his husband and said expressionlessly, "Your son is so much like you. She's as stingy as you." Then he sighed and shook his head. Before Emolien could reply, flabbergasted, the little stoic had already stood up and pattered out the door. "Just now, I heard someone report that the person from Ming province has come." Emolien picked up her son in exasperation and followed behind her. "You're still going to welcome him? When did his wife become so close to ACI?" The crown prince instantly felt a sense of crisis. Who's welcoming him? Arbor was baffled. "It's time, let's go to the dining room." Chapter 5483. Emolien was speechless. "Wife." He hurriedly chased after her with the baby in his arms and hugged her with a smile. "I was talking to you just now. You didn't even respond to me halfway through." Arbor turned her head to look at him. "Did you find that mysterious hall master?" Emolien was a little discouraged and shook her head. "I didn't find any trace of that mysterious hall master, but I saw Luohi, the deputy hall master of the Talisman Incantation Hall." "Luohi?" Arbor frowned slightly. "Oh, Jojo, aren't you curious at all?" Emolien poked her round cheeks with dissatisfaction. "Besides Luohi, guess who else I saw?" Arbor's eyes brightened. "That mysterious great master Yi?" Emolien broke into laughter and shook her head. "It's Mu Xiaoxue. So it's her." Arbor responded faintly, her expression slightly disdainful. "Your Highness, Crown Princess." Eunuch Chen hurried over and couldn't help but sigh in relief when he saw them. "His Highness the Crown Prince of Ming Province has arrived. So what if he's here?" Emolien retorted exasperatedly. "He even specially came to inform them." "Haha, so what if he's here? Does he expect them to line up to welcome him?" Eunuch Chen couldn't help but twitch his mouth and said seriously, "The Crown Prince of Ming Province wants your Highness and the Crown Princess to treat him to a meal." Emolien was very unhappy. "Why do you want to treat him to a meal again? Didn't you treat him to a meal every day when we were on the island last time?" Arbor nodded her little head as if they had a common enemy. "No. Let him go out and find a restaurant to eat." Eunuch Chen's mouth twitched as he complained incessantly in his heart. "It's the Crown Princess. Even if the two of you don't treat him to a meal to welcome the Crown Prince of Ming Province, wouldn't the palace's kitchen be able to make a sumptuous imperial meal? Asking someone to eat at a restaurant on the street was truly unheard of. Ming Yasi came uninvited. I hope the Crown Prince of the Divine Prefecture can forgive me." As the voice fell, a young man wearing an iron gray cloak walked over with straight legs and appeared in front of everyone. The maids and eunuchs of the Eastern Palace couldn't help but sneak a glance at him. Ming Yasi's pitch-black eyes stared fixedly at the two people on his stern and handsome face. His lips were tightly pursed, and his gaze directly went past Emolien to land on the child in his hands. Seeing that the Grand Master looked like he was going to beat up the Crown Prince and steal his child, the palace maids and eunuchs silently raised their legs to block the Crown Prince. Their family's little master was still young. He was not even a month old, so he could not be scared of anything. Ming Yasi strode over and rudely pushed aside the eunuch in front of him. "Get out of the way. What are you doing?" Arbor roared with his eyes wide open. Ming Yasi's hand paused as he glanced at her angrily. He already knew how protective this guy was of his own people. Back then, he threw some weapons at Morong's son and her group, but this damn girl looked down on him from beginning to end until today. It was as infuriating as it could be. Ming Yasi's handsome face darkened as he stretched out his hands in Baby Mo's direction. "Hand it over." "Hand what over? Do you think it's an object?" Emolien and Arbor glared at him ferociously at the same time, looking like they were eager to protect their child. "Hand it over for a hug." Ming Yasi said awkwardly with a cold expression. Xiaomu immediately reached out and took the child from her husband's arms with a protective expression on her face. Chapter 5484. She glared at Ming Yasi and said, "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to take revenge on my baby? You saw that I wasn't easy to deal with, so you had a brainwave and wanted to trip my baby up?" Mo Lian's mouth twitched, and he looked at Ming Yasi sympathetically. Sure enough, smoke was already coming out of the latter's head as he choked on his anger. "I'm telling you, no way." Arbor roared at him again. She hugged the baby with both hands, but her eyes were still glaring fiercely at Ming Yasi. Ming Yasi retorted exasperatedly, "Do you think I'm like you? Heartless and emotionless with a stoic face. Do I need to lay my hands on a baby? Hand it over." Arbor turned her head angrily. "Husband." Mo Lian was used to being called by his wife, so when he heard his wife call him that, he immediately took a step forward and rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was going to pick a fight with Ming Yasi. Ming Yasi was so angry that he was amused. He took out a palm-sized jade fan from his sleeve. There were even some pearls and jade tassels hanging from the bottom of the fan. It looked exquisite, small and pretty. "I'm here to give you a gift. Don't be ungrateful." Fuck, rushing over to give him a gift. This couple really made his heart ache every time he saw them. That darn lass, darn lass, darn lass. So many years had passed, but her temper was still as bad as ever, just like when they first met. What a vicious and petty person. Arbor blinked. She only felt that her hands were empty, and her son had already floated in Ming Yasi's direction. The couple was instantly speechless. This son was too immoral. Why would he automatically float over as long as there was something good? Ming Yasi was also taken aback. He didn't expect that the baby would come over on his own. This tiny baby, not even the size of a cat, was suspended in midair and staring at him expressionlessly. Why did this scene make one's scalp go numb? This why was the child of the crown prince and darn lass so different from other people's babies? Ming Yasi followed the baby's gaze downwards and landed on the jade fan in his hand. He hurriedly handed that exquisite little thing over. He himself didn't understand what was going on. It was clearly a baby in front of him. Was it possible for him to hand it over? Does the other party have hands to hold it? Just as he felt that his actions were strange and comical, he saw a flash of light on the jade fan in his hand, and it disappeared in an instant. Ming Yasi. Did this kid inherit Jojo's fine tradition? How did he receive gifts so quickly? Moreover, this little fellow had put the jade fan into his inner world? Dark Yas felt that this thought of his was somewhat terrifying. What kind of person could have an inner world? Only 1 in 10,000 people would be able to open their profound veins. Although the divine land was rich in spiritual power, it was rare for a child to be born with an inner world. Baby Mo stared at the person in front of him expressionlessly. After receiving the gift, he silently floated back to Arbor. The child did a beautiful somersault in the air and landed perfectly in Arbor's outstretched hands. Everyone was speechless as they stared at the swaddled baby with strange gazes. Arbor looked at Dias expressionlessly and curled the corners of his mouth. He forced a smile that didn't look like a smile. The child resembles his father. Please forgive me. Prince Mo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had received 10,000 critical hits. Ming Yasi was speechless. He glanced at Arbor. I heard that the people from Tianyan sent you a special letter a few days ago? You're quite well informed. Arbor glanced at him indifferently. The letter asked you to go to Qingzhou? Chapter 5485. Arbor didn't reply, but his expression clearly implied his tacit agreement. Ming Yasi couldn't help but become agitated and grumpily retorted. You aren't really thinking of going, right? You're usually so smart and arrogant. So why do you like to drop the ball at crucial moments? Sir Jojo glowered at him as he silently took out a shiny golden club from his inner world. Mo Lian twitched her mouth and wanted to go up to hold his impulsive wife's hand. However, Ming Yasi, this death-seeking fellow, continued to prattle on in front of Jojo. Do you know the situation in the kingdom of Qing province? Right now it's completely blocked by countless zombies. Don't joke around if you go. Let me tell you, that's where I came from. With your strength alone, It's impossible for you to sneak in, unless you force your way in. You must be clear-headed. Didn't you see that Duan Yu hasn't made much of a move for so long? He's such a black-bellied and shameless scoundrel. Something that can make him treat it so cautiously definitely isn't simple. Perhaps there's something incredible hidden inside and outside of Qing province. You must not walk right into a trap. You'll be out of your mind if you go. You're the one who's out of your mind. Arbor abruptly raised his golden club and smashed it at Ming Yassi's head. Emolian couldn't resist covering her face with her hands. Ming Yassi was even more frightened, and he immediately turned to flee. I'm saying this for your own good. He furiously turned back and roared at her. Don't think that you're so capable. I couldn't beat you several years ago, because my spirit meridians were sealed. But that doesn't mean I can't beat you now. I'm telling you. I'm just giving in to you. Your virtue is because you've been spoiled. But do you think that the Qin family's pack of ambitious thieves will give in to you like I did? If you dare to brandish a knife in front of that old geezer Ziqin, he'll dare to send several hundred zombies to gnaw you to death. Ming Yas tilted his head to the side and dodged a fiery meteor. When he turned around to look, he saw the little stoic stopping with a spurious smile. She raised the golden club in her hand and retorted with a single word. Long-winded. Mingya was so angry that he turned around and glared fiercely at Emolian. Prince Mo, baby Mo, who had been stuffed into her husband's arms before the beating, floated up on its own again. This fellow was like a spirit on her back, drifting along with his mother. Wherever his mother went, he would follow, always hanging behind his mother's back. This strange scene made the corners of everyone's eyes involuntarily twitch. Arbor slapped the club in his hand and said angrily, Who told you that I'm going to Qingzhou? Ming Yassi glanced at her. Given your character, how could you not go? Jojo Sama glared at him. Chapter 5486. This scene was inexplicably bizarre and comical, and the onlookers couldn't help laughing. Emolian silently turned back to glance at Ming Yassi as she grumbled in her mind. It's fine if you two are quarreling, but why are you glaring at me when you're upset? Ming Yassi was even more at a loss for words, and he turned to glare at Emolian again. This little ancestor, can't you listen to the main point? After listening for half a day, she said something along the lines of, You two understand him quite well. What does she mean? Is she angry? Emolian irritably rolled her eyes at him. Isn't it obvious? How can she leave if she's not angry? It's all that guy Duan Yu's fault. It's fine if you don't mention him, but Jojo gets even angrier when he's mentioned. The irritated Ming province's crown prince casually picked someone to berate. However, Emolian was amused by his rascally behavior and irritably retorted. Do you think it's easy to bully him just because he's not here? You're venting your anger on him when there's no one to vent it on. She was used to berating Duan Yu, but it was usually her berating him. Why did it feel a little jarring when she heard someone else berating him? She inexplicably wanted to retort. Humph. It must be because there were too many things troubling him recently, so he was also irritated. Simply baffling. Emolian turned to leave in a huff as she casually muttered. It's not like he's your punching bag. Ming Yassi glared at her departing figure and angrily asked. Hey, why are you leaving too? Hey, I'm here as a guest, but you're not even going to treat me to a meal? What kind of freaking hospitality was this? Why don't you ascend to the heavens? The royal maids and eunuchs who had been watching a good show quickly turned around and pretended to be busy wiping the tables, stools, vases, and curtains. They secretly turned to look at the Ming province's crown prince, who was hopping mad. Everyone silently felt that the Ming province's crown prince seemed a bit miserable. They didn't know what was going on, but they just felt that this guy seemed to have been completely ignored. Arbor stomped around the garden for a long time before she realized that her son was like a little shadow, floating behind her. This child usually didn't make much noise. If you teased him for a long time, he might just give you a lazy response. Arbor thought it was a little funny. She reached out and hugged the child, caressing his little face. Son, mother isn't angry. Mother just feels a little annoyed. Why do they all think that I, your mother, would be impulsive and brainless? Humph. Don't you think they are stupid? They are the brainless ones, not mother. Baby Mo's black eyes stared at Arbor and suddenly blinked. Arbor immediately kissed him happily. See, even her son was blinking at her in approval. As expected of her son, he could understand everything she said. A bunch of brainless fellows. Chapter 5487. Streaks of talisman energy flowed past, and under the whooshing of light and shadow, two sneaky figures emerged as expected. However, they abruptly hid behind a tree. Arbor chuckled and abruptly struck out with her palm. "You're courting death." With a crisp bang, half of the short tree was immediately snapped in half by the wind from her palm. Arbor recalled her son into the star domain in passing before swiftly darting over and viciously smashing her fist down. When Ming Yasi and Prince Emo rushed over, they saw the little stoic ruthlessly smashing her opponent's big head with her fist. The group of hidden guards stood expressionlessly on the side, wielding swords and sabers, but no one stepped forward to help. Ming Yasi's mouth twitched. He felt that the little stoic seemed to be even more violent than before. He couldn't bear to look straight at her, but he still couldn't resist shouting, "What are you all standing around for? Attack!" How could they let their master charge forward alone, while a group of hidden guards leisurely watched from the side? They really were a bunch of insensible fellows. The hidden guard leader abruptly glanced at the Ming province's crown prince. That contemptuous gaze disgusted the Ming province's crown prince. Fuck, this guy even dared to despise him, seeing that Ming Yasi was about to jump forward. Two of the hidden guards very kindly extended their arms to block him. "You probably don't understand our crown princess very well. Our crown princess didn't call for the crown princess personal guards today. This means that the crown princess doesn't need us to attack at the moment, and you don't need to go forward and help. If you help, the crown princess probably won't be too happy. Ming Yasi, as expected, you guys have captured the crown princess's heart." These words were extremely reasonable, so Ming Yasi stopped and silently stood to the side. He glanced at Emolien, who was also watching with folded arms, and harumphed. "You actually found a group of considerate hidden guards. They quite understand their master's intentions." Emolien conveniently cast him a glance and sneered. "Why don't you take a look at who hired these hidden guards? How can the people I recruit be bad?" Ming Yasi instantly didn't want to talk to this person in front of him. He turned his head and didn't look at him. Emolien couldn't help but curl her lips. She cursed in her heart. "You make it sound like I really want to talk to you. If you don't want to talk, then don't talk. You'd better stay away from me." However, Emolien ignored him, so he couldn't resist turning back to say to Emolien, "You probably don't know how deranged that guy Duan Yu is in the kingdom of Qing state, right?" Emolien looked at him expressionlessly. "Don't even think about trying to sow discord. This monarch will not listen to your untruthful words." "Did you know that Duan Yu would have people use you and Jojo's name to go up the city gate tower, to shout insults every few days?" "Oh, that's right. You probably don't know, but Duan Yu had someone build a watchtower outside of Qingzhou to allow his subordinates to go up and curse in the streets every day. He's mainly hiding in the back and not saying anything, but he's using you and Jojo's name to scold us. Tell me, why do you have such a bad friend?" Emolien. The kingdom of Qing state was a small kingdom to begin with. The entire kingdom was even slightly smaller than Dragon Flame City. As long as they could invade the kingdom of Qing state, they could basically invade their capital within a day. Hence, Ming Yasi seriously suspected that Duan Yu, this idiot, might have discovered something, which was why he hadn't made a move yet. His subordinates used 18 different styles of cursing, and even said that they were following your and Jojo's orders to participate in this war of words. Emolien, you don't know, right? That guy has done so many deranged things behind your backs. Who says I don't know? Chapter 5488. Emolien was so annoyed by his words that she couldn't resist rebuking him coldly. This time, it was Ming Yas's turn to be stupefied, and he stared at him in disbelief. You knew? Realization dawned on him. So it turns out that you and him are secretly communicating with each other. Then does Jojo know? Jojo definitely doesn't know. Prince Emo wished for nothing more than to slap him to death. Do you know how to speak? What do you mean by communicating with each other? What kind of fucking words are you using? You scoundrel. Scram. Who are you telling to scram? Ming Yas glared at him. You better be more polite to me. I'm not that person from many years ago who could be casually beaten and scolded by you. What a pitiful child. While they were speaking, Arbor had already swiftly ended the battle. He kicked the two fellows who were forced out by the appearance talisman, and kicked them in front of Emolien and Ming Yas. Everyone silently retreated, leaving a suitable distance to continue spectating. The little stoic charged forward with a golden club in her hand. Without any explanation, she smashed the two people who still wanted to get up to the ground with two bangs. She took advantage of the situation and kicked the person in front of her, sending him tumbling forward until he reached a hidden guard. The group of secret guards very considerately retreated a bit, forming a perfect encirclement, trapping the person in a circle. As long as the guarantor didn't escape the encirclement, the rest would depend on how the crown princess would perform. As expected, the little crown princess didn't disappoint. She threw down two binding talismans, making it difficult for the thief to escape, even though he had spun a cocoon around himself. Both of them were bound by the binding talismans and couldn't move for a moment. Arbor leaped forward and viciously smashed the club into that person's back, directly knocking him to the ground. Speak. Did that hall master of charms send you guys to scout for information? Arbor stepped on that person. Don't try to deceive me. I know you guys are people of the blessed ones. With the enhancement of invisibility talismans and aura-concealing talisman matrix, it wouldn't be believable if they said they weren't disciples of the blessed ones. But how could the two of them sneak into the garden of the Eastern Palace? The two of them were only at the high level of the spirit realm. The young crown princess knew very well that with their skills, it was almost impossible for them to get past the many spies outside the Eastern Palace and the various checkpoints to get here. So these two people should have come in through normal means? She sized up their attire. Sure enough, they were dressed in eunuch attire. Moreover, this kind of eunuch attire should be the attire of the kitchen in the backyard. Prince Mo's expression instantly chilled. He beckoned for Huifeng to come over and quietly instructed, "Pass down my orders. Strictly investigate every courtyard in place to see if there are any outsiders who have snuck in. Once discovered, kill them on the spot." Yes, Huifeng knew the severity of the situation, so he immediately accepted the order and left. At the same time, the young crown princess stared coldly at the two who had committed suicide by consuming poison on the ground. If he died, then so be it. He could still ask questions even if he died. He could ask for more details. Xiao Mu's lips curled into a sneer. With a flick of her finger, two strands of talisman energy emerged from the two soul-summoning talismans and instantly burrowed into the two people's foreheads. Although Arbor couldn't see the souls, she could sense the talisman energy within the souls. Thus, she coldly questioned the two wandering souls the moment they appeared. Unfortunately, the other party knew very little. This was also what she had expected. After dispersing the two wandering souls, Arbor turned to look at her husband with a dark expression. Tomorrow definitely won't be peaceful. Chapter 5489. The next day, before the sun had even risen, everyone in the palace was already busy with their respective duties. Today was the little imperial grandson's 1-month-old birthday banquet, so they had to make it a perfect one. Actually, everyone had already started preparing half a month ago. Today, everyone was just in their respective positions to ensure that no mistakes were made and no one caused trouble. The banquet was held in the Eastern Palace's Sanyua Hall. The little imperial grandson was placed on a small jade bed in the warm room, watched over by 2 wet nurses and 4 palace maids. When the banquet attendees arrived at the Eastern Palace, they all eagerly looked at the little baby. Once this baby was born, he would be a precious and pampered child. Putting aside the fact that His Majesty had pardoned the world for his sake, this child's parents were also such extraordinary people. He inherited his parents' terrifying talent and caused a huge commotion with 3 days and 3 nights of heavenly tribulation and lightning punishment as soon as he was born. Such a little baby would definitely have a bright future. Princess Consort Kong was overjoyed as she held baby Mo. Several first-rank titled madams also surrounded the princess consort, laughing and playing with the baby. The baby remained expressionless and did not smile. There were no fluctuations in his heart. This calm little face made the princess consort very amused. She waved a small jade ruby in her hand and called out, "Little dumpling, little dumpling." Suddenly, she realized that the jade ruby in her hand had disappeared. Princess Consort Kong looked at her palm in confusion, then took out a golden pendant from the jade plate at the side to tease the baby. The two wet nurses who were squeezed by the group of madams couldn't help but facepalm. The little imperial grandson was now at the age where he was interested in everything. Basically, as long as something flashed in front of his eyes, the little imperial grandson would treat it as his own possession and silently store it in his inner world. No one knew who he had this problem with. After this happened a few times, the princess consort noticed that something was wrong and called out to the wet nurses in surprise. "Nanny, Nanny, does this child have an inner world?" A slightly older wet nurse said with a smile. "That's right, princess consort. The little imperial grandson had an inner world when he was born." Not only that, the little imperial grandson was also the youngest godly realm expert in the 3 continents. Wang Fei couldn't help but roar with laughter. She reached out to tap the little baby's pearl-like forehead. "Io, Auntie's little darling, why are you so cute?" When the little stoic sent people to invite the titled madams over, everyone was in the middle of a heated game with the little stoic royal grandson. Their so-called game was to take out good things from their pockets and dangle them in front of the little prince's eyes, only to see them disappear one by one. After repeating this several times, the group of women actually laughed heartily. When Princess Kong returned to the main hall of Sanua Palace, she was very happy to see Jojo. She kept telling her about baby Mo's interesting stories. Arbor first glanced at her, then was slightly stunned, and then looked her up and down a few times. Princess Consort Kong immediately looked down at herself and asked in confusion, "What's wrong, Jojo?" Arbor blinked and looked expressionlessly at Princess Consort Kong. He raised a hand to grasp her wrist and quickly took her pulse. Subsequently, Sir Jojo looked at her with sparkling eyes and said crisply, "Royal Aunt, congratulations." Princess Consort Kong was a bit baffled. "Jojo, what are you congratulating me for? You're more than a month pregnant, Royal Aunt." "What?" The little crown princess's voice wasn't soft, so there were many people in the main hall right now. Today was the little imperial grandson's 1-month-old birthday banquet, so the male and female guests weren't seated separately. Instead, they were all in the same hall. Chapter 5490. When the little stoic said this, not only did the nearby titled madams and royal court officials hear it clearly, but some of the patrician family's madams and young misses also heard it. Princess Consort Kong instantly revealed a pleasantly surprised expression, and her voice trembled slightly. "Jojo, you didn't deceive Royal Aunt?" Arbor stroked the back of her hand and said with a nod, "Royal Aunt, it's absolutely true. It's been more than a month." Lu Lanyan couldn't help but tremble in her pleasant surprise. Arbor was already on guard and knew that Lu Lanyan must be very excited right now, so he hastily helped her to sit down on the side. "Royal Aunt, I'll prescribe a nourishing prescription for you. You just need to take it once every 3 days. Your body has been nourished very well, and the child is also very healthy." "Jojo." Lu Lanyan couldn't resist crying tears of joy. She held Arbor's hand and nodded repeatedly. "Royal Aunt is really, I don't know what to say. It's all thanks to you, Jojo. Don't mention it. We're all family, so it's only right." Arbor was speaking with Lu Lanyan. Just then, he heard cries of surprise from the door. Prince, hurry, hurry and help Prince, hurry and help him up." What happened? It seems like the old prince was too excited when he heard that the princess consort was pregnant, so he tripped over the threshold. A madam explained while suppressing her laughter. Arbor couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he heard this. When he looked up, he saw Prince Kong running over aggressively, as though he was seeking revenge on someone. Princess consort. The old prince jogged over and hastily grabbed his wife's hand, asking excitedly, I heard them say that you Princess Consort Kong couldn't help but chuckle when she saw his stupidly excited appearance. She nodded at him with a smile and said, "It's Jojo's conclusion after taking her pulse." Then it was undoubtedly accurate. In this world, who didn't know of Xiqiao's alchemy skills? The old prince couldn't help but laugh until his eyes turned into slits. The crowd of courtiers and upper-class women hurriedly came forward to form a circle, smiling as they congratulated Prince Kong and his wife. Nowadays, the old prince found anyone pleasing to his eyes. Everyone he saw had a good expression on their faces, and he laughed heartily. Arbor was also very happy. Auntie Emperor's sufferings were finally over. After her body recovered, everything would be better in the future. Arbor took the time to visit his son in front of the jade bed in the warm room. She picked up the baby and played with him for a while. Then, she patted the baby's swaddling clothes and coaxed him to sleep. Only then did she gently place the child back into the small jade bed. After covering him with a small blanket, she slowly stood up. "All right, let the child sleep for a while. There's no need for so many people to stay here." "Yes." Chapter 5492. Arbor covered her face with her handkerchief and sobbed. Qiuqiu was speechless. "Master, I'm begging you, can you not act so pretentiously?" Qiuqiu really wanted to tell Master Silver that her high and mighty image in the past had already been established in everyone's hearts. No one would think that she was a weak and helpless little wife. As expected, the hundreds of masked men in black all looked at her in astonishment and exchanged glances. "Be careful of traps," one of the masked men said in a low voice. Master had once instructed that the woman in front of them was extremely difficult to deal with. She was cunning, ruthless, and vicious. But why did it feel like Master's description of the woman in front of them didn't match? Therefore, this woman must be pretending. However, there was also a possibility that Master's calculations were very accurate. This woman's weakness was the child that they had captured. As expected, Master's guess was right. A child was indeed the most important thing to a mother. Once the child was captured, no matter how strong a woman was, she would have to obediently submit like a little lamb. The crowd opened up a path for the man holding the baby to walk over. This person was the leader of the masked men, who had grabbed baby Mo and jumped onto the wall. At this moment, his vicious little eyes were shining. He held the baby tightly in one hand and let out a sharp and cold laugh. "Arbor, you didn't think that you would have such a day, did you?" Master Jojo held her handkerchief and stared at the baby in the man's hand with watery eyes. She stretched out a pair of small claws and called out weakly and pitifully. Baby, Prince Mo and Ming Yas, who had rushed over, couldn't help but look at each other silently. Jojo's act wasn't over yet. Master Jojo, who was possessed by the drama queen, used her handkerchief to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes and said pitifully, "Big brother, please have mercy. If my son loses a single hair, I will definitely make your entire family pay with blood. Not only that, I will also make you disappear into thin air. Not even a single hair of yours will exist in this world." Her voice became colder and colder as she spoke. He raised his head and stared at the other party with a pair of cold and merciless eyes. Qing Grass, who was holding the baby, felt her body stiffen. She couldn't help but shudder. The gaze of this damn woman, Xiaomu, was incomparably frigid, just like the icy soul pearl. Even though he was mentally prepared, he couldn't help but be frightened by her. Seeing Arbor take a step forward, Qin Xiao couldn't help but take a step back with the baby in her arms. She then turned around and ran, one hand still tightly clutching the baby's neck. "All of you back off. If he dares to chase, I will kill him." Sir Jojo's eyes lit up as he hurriedly shouted, "Baby!" She shouted frantically, "Don't move, don't move." After saying that, one of them hurriedly chased after him. Like I said, the show is halfway through. If you quit halfway, it wouldn't be fun anymore. Since these people were targeting her, she had to meet them no matter what. Ming Yash chased after him for 2 steps before Arbor shouted, "Don't move." He turned to look at Emolien. "What's that in that person's hand?" "Xiao Xiao, that cunning little scoundrel. It was impossible for her to leave her son alone in the warm room. He must have swapped the baby long ago. Qin Grass grabbed the baby with one hand and ran wildly while looking back. Chapter 5493. Seeing Arbor chase after him. A sinister sneer involuntarily surfaced on Qin Grass's lips. The effect of you chasing after me alone is exactly what I want. As long as you dare to chase after me, you won't be far from death. A sinister glint flitted through Qin Grass's eyes, and he abruptly raised his hand. Many black-clothed and masked men jumped out from all directions and surrounded them. Several hundred yellow talismans floated up in the air and circled around the crowd before rapidly gathering around Arbor. Like shackles, they abruptly trapped her inside. Qin Grass watched as the little stoic ran headfirst into the talisman formation, in a panic, and frantically pulled at the talismans in front of her. She shouted in panic, "Who exactly are you? Why did you capture my son? Let go of my son, baby." A carefree smile instantly flitted across Qin Grass's heart. As expected, a woman who lost her child was like a tiger without its fangs and didn't possess the slightest bit of deterrence. That woman's chilly venomous glare just now must have been a misconception. How would she dare to be unyielding with them now? They captured her child, so she could only allow herself to be captured. Enough nonsense. Now obediently walk in here yourself. Qin Grass took out a triangular tent from his inner world and said coldly to Arbor, "Otherwise I'll strangle him to death." Faint disdain flitted across Arbor's eyes as she was wrapped in a pile of yellow talismans. She thought they had some way to take her away, but it turned out they only wanted to take her son away to restrain her. Their method of taking her away was also extremely barbaric and crude. Using the space spiritual abode to store her was underestimating JoJo too much. You don't have any other methods? Arbor couldn't help but ask again. Qin Grass. Why did he inexplicably feel that the situation in front of him was a bit off? I've cooperated with you until now, but you only sent these few people? Arbor gloomily glared at the several hundred masked men in black. You have to work hard. She clenched her small fists and made an encouraging gesture for everyone. Qin Grass. I thought you would send at least 1,000 people to capture me. At the very least, you should send that mysterious hall master of your talisman hall. At the very least, you should send Luohi. Why is it only you bunch of shrimps? Arbor was indignant. She pointed at them and said angrily, Are you looking down on this crown princess? After a round of reprimanding, Qin Grass and the others were dumbfounded. What was the situation now? What's going on? Mo Lian held back her laughter and cleared her throat. She couldn't help but reveal herself. All right, JoJo, these are the people in front of you. Arbor swept away the messy pile of yellow talismans in front of his eyes and stepped on them several times. Then, he took 2 steps forward and slapped Qin Grass. Idiot. The corner of Ming Yasi's mouth twitched. Do you think that no one will find out just because you sent some people to infiltrate the Eastern Palace? That wet nurse was left behind on purpose to help you. Otherwise, we would have dealt with her yesterday. Arbor roared at him in annoyance, his face gloomy and angry. To think that I was full of anticipation, wondering how your Qin Hong would deal with me. And the result? Arbor roared at Qin Grass. Useless. Everyone. She lifted the tent in Qin Hong's hands and stepped on it twice. You want to take JoJo away with a lousy spiritual abode? Dream on. Where are the Crown Princess's personal guards? A group of secret guards suddenly jumped forward and answered in unison. Here. Who would have thought that after the golem landed on the ground, it would grow in the wind and evolve to a height of 2 meters in a matter of minutes. With a stiff iron fist, it rushed towards Zither Grass without hesitation. Qin Grass was shocked and hurriedly raised his arms to block. A ferocious hammer fiercely smashed into his arms. Qin Grass could even hear a light kacha sound. His arm was almost crippled. It was clear how powerful that mechanical puppet's heavy punch was. Qin Grass's entire body was sent flying backwards. He did a backflip and landed heavily on the ground. He barely managed to stabilize himself with his hands. He raised his head and looked at Arbor, who was looking at him coldly. His heart trembled, and his pupils dilated. Fast, too fast. That little stoic simply didn't wait for him to adjust his breathing and regain his composure. A vine whip that meandered like a fire dragon had already swept in front of him. The vine whip landed heavily on Chingrass's face, causing him to howl in pain. He immediately rolled on the ground, covering his face as he desperately rolled. TSK, the face slapping actually came so quickly. If he didn't escape now, he wouldn't have another chance. Now that his plan had been exposed, and he had failed to snatch the child, he had no one to rely on. If he didn't escape now, he might lose his life here today. Slurp. Everyone took a closer look, and saw a little mouse crawling out from a pile of clothes, and running away in a panic with its tail between its legs. But very quickly, everyone discovered that this pitiful little mouse was bumping into walls everywhere. Taking a closer look, he saw that the little mouse was surrounded by defensive walls. It had nowhere to run. Arbor hooked up the corners of her lips, a trace of cold mockery appearing on her lips. She took a few steps forward, and raised her hand with a frown. The blue spiritual cleansing flames turned into an empty palm, and grabbed the little mouse's tail from a distance. The vine whip in Arbor's hand ruthlessly lashed at the little mouse. I told you not to underestimate me. Her whip heavily lashed at the little mouse's body, almost tearing that tattered body of the mouse into two. Chapter 5496. Do you really think I'm that stupid? I let you use the transformation talisman to escape once. Do you think I'll let you escape a second time today? Her eyes coldly stared at Qin Grass without a trace of sympathy. This person had been Qin Hong's lackey for so many years. It was unknown how many people he had killed. What was there to sympathize with? Even if he was as weak as a mouse right now, he didn't deserve any sympathy. Qin Grass didn't think that even after transforming into a mouse, he still couldn't escape from the vicious woman. He let out a miserable scream, but the sound that came out was the squeaking of a mouse. Arbor coldly snorted. She waved her hand to have the wooden vines form a small wooden cage, and threw the fool inside. Qin Grass frantically scurried around the cage, but the cage was full of barbs made of wooden thorns. After he frantically jumped around in a panic, he was covered in wounds, and there wasn't a single piece of flesh on his body that wasn't injured. Qin Grass, this little mouse, had walked right into the trap. At that time, he felt that there was no way for him to live. He collapsed to the ground with his belly sticking out, squeaking for a while. After using the transformation talisman, he wouldn't be able to recover in a short time. Arbor's eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule. With a move of her finger, clusters of blue flames were thrown into the cage, erecting several blue flame walls around the little mouse. The high temperature of the fire spirit made Qin Grass squeak and scurry around, but there was nothing he could do. On the contrary, his originally dirty and dark fur was burned by the blue flames, becoming even more disheveled and disheveled. Arbor saw that this guy was about to be tortured, so she waved her hand and took out a purple talisman. She said to herself, "Let's see what the effects are." This was the newest talisman she had learned from the 11th Jade Slip, Soul-Searching Talisman. As the name implied, its effect was the same as manual soul-searching. Moreover, its greatest advantage was that manual soul-searching could result in something like a soul explosion, causing the soul searcher to fall into a dangerous situation and suffer a backlash from the soul explosion. Soul-Searching Talisman was different. If the other party wanted to explode their soul, they would be suppressed by the Soul-Searching Talisman. In the end, it would be very painful and their soul would scatter. With this kind of soul-searching talisman, there was no need to be afraid of being tricked again. Arbor happily threw out the soul-searching talisman. So what if the other party turned into a rat? In essence, his spirit was still that of a zither herb. As the soul-searching talisman took effect, the rats in the cage let out a series of shrill screams. At the same time, Arbor could selectively receive all the information from the other party's consciousness. Leaving aside some useless information was the important information about the heavenly fate. The soul-searching process lasted for the time it took for an incense stick to burn. As for Qin Chao, that pitiful smelly rat, it was now lying in the small cage on the verge of death, and gradually stopped moving. Obviously, Zithergrass's divine sense couldn't withstand the pressure of the soul-searching talisman. He was completely finished. Arbor tossed a torch over and burned it to ashes. Only then did he turn to look at the Eastern Palace shadow guards, who were slowly coming to a stop. More than half of the hundreds of Heavenly Fate disciples that Qin Chao had brought in with his spatial spiritual abode were dead or injured. The rest were surrounded by the shadow guards and forced to kneel on the ground with swords and knives at their necks. Arbor's cold gaze swept over them. He raised his hand and waved. The shadow guards immediately retreated with the remaining Heavenly Fate disciples. Arbor stomped back to Emolien's side. Emo didn't even have the time to change the target of Arbor's death talisman. He could only deal with Mo, who was enveloped by the light of the talisman. Xiaomu was startled, and she shouted, "Mo along with Emolien, you see," and He Chun and the others who flew out of the star field. They all rushed over together. Countless bursts of sacred energy suddenly struck the outer layer of the light of the talisman. Xiaomu had even flung out her vine whip, wanting to yank Mo out the moment the opening opened. However, Mo was right in front of her eyes. She looked like snowflakes that were falling off her soul body. The light and shadow shattered. She had simply disappeared too quickly. Arbor saw her turn around and smile at him. The smile between her brows was gentle. Arbor flew over and reached out to hug her. This person turned into pieces in front of her eyes and disappeared without a trace. No, she couldn't accept it. As long as she had this sacred tool, her host's soul would be safe and sound. You just can't accept the fact that she suddenly left. Yes, this is too sudden, but we know that everyone must have their own path to walk. Emolien lowered his head to look at her while hugging her. She's gone now, but it doesn't mean that she won't come back. Besides, what are you worried about? Jojo is so cute. Even if that dumb girl forgot about you for a while and doesn't like you, you'll always have a way to make her your friend again, right? Xiaomu drooped her small head, listless and listless. That was the reason, but she still couldn't accept it psychologically. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.